Most conspiracy theories are nothing more than stories with very little, if any, truth to them. There are a few disturbing conspiracy theories that have been proven true, such as the infamous MKUltra experiments. So far, these dark conspiracy theories haven't been proven, and there might not be all that much evidence behind them, but if they were proven correct, it could change how we look at the world. Number 5. As one of the oldest civilizations in the world, it's not surprising that ancient Egypt is often the focus of conspiracy theories. The civilization has fascinated people for hundreds of years, and many have questioned how these ancient people managed to achieve all that they did. One of the best-known statues from ancient Egypt is the Great Sphinx at Giza. Like the pyramids that lie in front of it, there are many conspiracy theories surrounding the Sphinx. Who made it, and when exactly? The Sphinx water erosion hypothesis not only suggests that the accepted archaeology surrounding the Sphinx is incorrect, but that there was once a civilization much older than the ancient Egyptians. The Sphinx sits in front of the Great Pyramids. It's 20 meters tall, 19 meters wide, and 79 meters long. Rather than being built up from stone transported from elsewhere like the pyramids were, the Sphinx is carved out of the same bedrock that it now sits upon. It's believed that the head of the Sphinx, or possibly the whole body, was once an outcrop of rock. The ancient Egyptians quarried around the body, gradually forming the lounging lion that still stands today. A temple and enclosure were planned and partially built around the Sphinx, but construction was never completed. When Giza was abandoned, sand reclaimed the areas that the Egyptians had dug out, and the Sphinx was buried up to its shoulders, only to be recovered in 1800 BC. Since then, it's been a wonder and tourist attraction, fascinating everyone from ancient Romans to modern scholars. Who built the Sphinx is something of a mystery. Unlike with the pyramids, there are no texts describing it being commissioned or worked on. There's nothing dedicating the Sphinx to a pharaoh or anybody else. Archaeologists and Egyptologists have concluded that it was likely built during the reign of Khafra around 2500 BC. Khafra was the fourth pharaoh from the 4th dynasty of Egypt, which existed in the Egyptian Old Kingdom. He was the son of Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza and reigned after his brother. Khafra built the second tallest pyramid at Giza, which sits directly behind the Sphinx, as well as the Valley Temple located next to the statue. Given its proximity to the other monuments, it would make sense that the Sphinx was built at this time. There are other pieces of archaeological evidence which suggest it was built after the pyramid and other works by Khafra, as these encroach on the enclosure around the Sphinx. The statue had to be built around existing monuments. Other evidence pointing to Khafra is the fact that he built smaller sphinxes, which were located at the entrances to his temples. For many, the head of the Sphinx is evidence enough. There are realistic statues of Khafra that have been discovered and remain in good condition. Even though there's obvious damage to the Sphinx's head, many claim that the face closely resembles that of other Khafra statues. But others believe that there's evidence that the statue is much older. Around the body of the Sphinx are vertical grooves in the rock. At first glance, these look like gaps between large bricks which have been rounded over time. But the ancient statue wasn't built with bricks, and these grooves aren't deliberate. Some have argued that these and other parts of the Sphinx are evidence of water erosion. Earlier versions of this theory suggested the Sphinx was older than any known civilization. The obvious explanation for water erosion in a desert was that it once had been covered in water, perhaps in the Great Flood. This theory suggested that an extremely ancient civilization, possibly refugees from Atlantis, traveled to Egypt and made the Sphinx. A more modern version of this theory is more plausible but still denied by mainstream archaeology. Geologists who have studied the Sphinx have said that the erosion couldn't have been caused by flooding. Even the periodic flooding of the Nile, which we know actually happened, couldn't have caused this. There would have been more erosion at the bottom of the statue and its enclosure if this was the case. The real cause of the erosion had to be rain. Today, Egypt only gets a couple of inches of rain in a year, and it's been that way through most of human history. But more than 7,000 years ago, that wasn't the case. For a relatively short period of time, geologically speaking, the area that's currently a desert was once green. It received enough rainfall to sustain a forest and to cause water erosion on the Sphinx. This placed the creation of the Sphinx between 7,000 and 10,000 years ago. Interestingly, around this time, the Sphinx could have pointed in the direction of the constellation Leo. Geologists have used technology to show that there's more water erosion in the area at the front of the enclosure than at the back, suggesting that the rear of the enclosure surrounding the Sphinx may have been excavated later than the front. It could be that, like Thutmose IV in 1800 BC, Khafra simply uncovered something that had been built thousands of years before him. The evidence for this theory focuses on the vertical grooves that seem to indicate water erosion. According to those who believe the theory, this erosion isn't seen in any of the other buildings that were built at the same time that the Sphinx was supposed to be built. The fact that the head of the Sphinx supposedly resembles Khafra can be easily explained. The head of the Sphinx is noticeably out of proportion compared to the rest of the body. It's much smaller. Considering the great feats that the ancient Egyptians managed, it's difficult to believe that this was a mistake. A theory suggests that the Sphinx once had the head of another animal. The most popular theory is that of a lioness, and it was simply a statue of a lion. It could have also been a jackal or the Set animal. It was later resculpted into a human head. If this theory is tied into the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis, it explains two problems. The original Sphinx, or Great Lion statue, could have been constructed between 7,000 and 10,000 years ago, and Khafra had the head resculpted in his own image after he rediscovered it. This would also explain why the body of the animal seems to be much more eroded, even though it was protected by sand for such a long time. The major problem with this theory is the lack of evidence for a more ancient civilization. It would have taken a lot of work and coordination for the Great Sphinx to be built. There's plenty of evidence for this in ancient Egyptian times. While there are no images of the Sphinx being built, there are many paintings of the pyramids being constructed, showing that coordination. Our current understanding of history suggests that the people living in Egypt during this green period were simple hunter-gatherers. They didn't leave behind any evidence of a society or anything that indicated this level of coordination. But there are other statues around the world that would require a great deal of coordination, but the evidence for that civilization is missing. These structures aren't on the same scale as the Sphinx, but it seems to indicate that these projects can be undertaken without the people who built them, leaving behind clues for later historians. If this conspiracy theory is true, it changes everything we know about the development of civilization, and could put the date when humans advanced past the hunter-gatherer stage much earlier in our history. Number 4. The pharaoh Akhenaten is possibly the most controversial pharaoh in ancient Egyptian history. To most people, he's best known as the father of King Tut. To those with an interest in Egyptology, he's the man who changed the kingdom's religion. To those interested in conspiracy theories, he's the most interesting of all the ancient kings. Akhenaten ruled Egypt between 1353 BC and 1356. He was born Amenhotep IV and was the younger son of his father. His elder brother passed away before his father, so when Amenhotep III passed away, the crown went to him instead. Very early in his reign, he changed his name to Akhenaten and turned Egypt on its head. Up until this point, Egypt was polytheistic, with different gods worshipped in different places. There were roughly 2,000 acknowledged gods. Some overlapped with one another, or were even pretty much the same god but worshipped under a different name in a different place. But Akhenaten decided to change all that. Aten, the sun disk, had been rising in importance for a while before Akhenaten took the throne. Akhenaten didn't just make it the most important god, he made it the only god that could be worshipped. Other temples were taxed and then entirely closed down. The worshipping of other gods was forbidden. He also said that he was the only person that Aten spoke through, making the temple staff pointless. It wasn't just religion that changed under Akhenaten's rule, but art styles too. Ancient Egyptian art was very formulaic up until this point. People were drawn from the side in a small number of different poses. There was a lot of symbolism, but making sure that the person was drawn in a certain way was important for their body in the afterlife. Akhenaten permitted more realistic-looking art styles, and images depicting him and his wives and family scenes rather than the typical poses. After Akhenaten passed away, the country quickly reverted to polytheism. Akhenaten was apparently despised by those who came after him. His face was destroyed in images, meaning that he wouldn't be able to see or eat in the afterlife. His remains were not properly mummified. Important protection stones that were supposed to curse anybody who tried to get into his sarcophagus were placed upside down, suggesting they were supposed to curse Akhenaten's spirit when it left. Akhenaten's memory was destroyed, and the people responsible hoped that his spirit was destroyed too. Akhenaten is a favorite of believers in ancient alien theories, due to the imagery surrounding this ancient ruler. He was depicted as being more slender, almost feminine, with a long head and long fingers. Believers in the ancient aliens theory suggest this is evidence that he was an alien himself, or descended from one. The sun disk wasn't the sun at all, but some kind of UFO. In reality, Akhenaten likely had a condition called Marfan syndrome, which causes elongated bones and problems with connecting tissue. It's known that his son Tut was extremely sick when he passed away, and it would not be surprising if his father was too. This can't be proven due to the damaged state of Akhenaten's remains, but seems to be the more likely theory. He wasn't an alien, but someone who was just very sick. It's even been suggested that this might have helped promote Atenism, as Marfan syndrome can cause blindness, and the sun disk might have been comparatively more visible to him. But one of the strangest conspiracy theories about Akhenaten isn't that he was an alien. Atenism disappeared only a generation after Akhenaten, but other religions he may have inspired still live today. Akhenaten was the second son of an Egyptian ruler who promoted monotheism in a polytheistic nation. He moved his capital across the Nile River and further north to modern-day Amara, which he named Akhenaten, meaning the horizon of Aten. According to one scholar on the subject, there's an inscription on a block marking the outskirts of Akhenaten, which declares it to be Aten's promised land. The conspiracy theory suggests that Akhenaten either was or inspired the biblical Moses. It's easy to see similarities between the two figures. Moses was raised as a member of the Pharaoh's court and rose to be a high-ranking government official before the Abrahamic God appeared to him. The story of Exodus is one of the most well-known in the Bible. God parted the Red Sea, and Moses and his followers fled to Egypt to go to the Promised Land. God also gave Moses the Ten Commandments, with the first banning the worship of other gods. According to this theory, Moses and his followers didn't cross the Red Sea, but the Nile, and the Promised Land wasn't in Canaan but Akhenaten. The traditional Jewish dates for Moses' life also put him in the same time as Akhenaten's rule, between 1391 and 1271 BC. There's even a painting of Akhenaten inside the tomb of his chief scribe, which shows the pharaoh holding a stone tablet over his head. Rather than a list of pharaohs and lineages, as might be expected, the writing on the tablet says it's the word of God. It's possible that during the destruction of Akhenaten's image and memory after his passing, some of the followers who still believed in Atenism fled further north to escape those who wanted to undo everything that Akhenaten did. There's no archaeological evidence for Moses or a mass exodus of people from Egypt. Using biblical chronology, Canaan was actually a part of Egypt during the time when the Exodus story is said to have taken place. The earliest writings about Moses come hundreds of years after his passing, and in the form of stories rather than the straight history we know today. Despite the best efforts of later Egyptians, there is evidence of Akhenaten's existence, his monotheism, and his moving of the capital to another part of Egypt. Monotheism in Judaism developed over a long period of time. A lot of early Judaism was inspired by the religions of the people around them, which explains why so many stories and mythical beings from other cultures appear in the Old Testament. Some believe that this wasn't the sudden push of one man, as happened in Egypt. Number 3. Another creepy biblical conspiracy theory concerns the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. According to the Bible, the citizens of these cities were so sinful that God decided to wipe them from the face of the planet. According to the Bible, the two cities once stood on the east side of the Jordan River. During the time of Abraham, the cities, especially Sodom, gained a reputation for their wickedness. The cities were rich and plentiful, but exceptionally greedy and cruel. God decides the two cities and their inhabitants need to be destroyed, but sends angels down to warn Lot, Abraham's nephew, and his family. The family are warned to flee to the hills and not look back. Famously, Lot's wife does look back and is turned into a pillar of salt, while he and his daughters survive. God then rains down fire and brimstone on the two cities. The next day, a cloud of smoke is still seen coming from where the cities had once stood. This story is referred to many other times in the Bible as a warning of what will happen if people lead lives of sin. Most scholars claim that it's nothing more than a story, but that hasn't stopped people from looking at the story more literally. Now, keep in mind, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I'm purely sharing other people's opinions here, not suggesting that I do or don't believe any of these theories. Certainly don't let this video dictate how you do or don't believe in certain religions. But in the 1960s, a Soviet scientist named Dr. M. Agrest put forward a shocking theory. He was a physio-mathematician and worked in an age when atomic power was the only thing on people's minds. He suggested that there was evidence that the fire and brimstone that had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah was actually a nuclear blast. These cities were the ancient versions of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, caught up in the war of an extremely advanced civilization. At the time, the evidence for this theory only came in the form of tektites, found in the desert in Jordan. These are small pieces of glass which form under intense heat and pressure. They normally indicate an ancient meteorite strike, but could be caused by a nuclear attack. Agrest suggested that this extremely advanced civilization might have come from outer space. He wouldn't be the last person to suggest that the story was actually an interpretation of a nuclear strike. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, or the remains of the cities, have never been found. But in recent years, archaeologists have discovered ancient cities that could be the infamous biblical locations. One of these features some disturbing elements. The Tel El Hammam is an archaeological site located close to the Jordan River, in an area known as the Jordan Valley. It's been known to archaeologists since the 1900s, and excavations have taken place over many stages. The city is believed to have dated back to the Bronze Age. At that time, it was bigger than the neighboring cities and likely richer, but it suddenly collapsed and was abandoned by the inhabitants. Centuries later, it's believed to have been used by Romans around the 1st century CE. In 2005, archaeologists found a layer of debris 1.5 meters thick that caught their attention. It was from the Bronze Age period and contained material that seemed to be superheated. Finding out why the city was abandoned has been an important goal for researchers. There were no signs of any weaponry found at the site, indicating that it hadn't been destroyed in some kind of battle. What happened was very sudden and didn't have a clear reason. Trinitite was found in the area. Like tektites, these are pieces of glassy rock formed by the intense heat of a nuclear blast. Previously, this substance has only been found at the site of nuclear events, like test sites in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Other objects, such as pottery, seem to have been heated or glazed by something, but only on one side. This indicated the heat did not come from some kind of oven. The most disturbing piece of evidence for this theory is some of the human remains found at the site. Archaeologists found the lower half of the skeletons of ancient people, but they stopped with a scorch mark halfway up the backbone and the upper halves of the skeletons were missing. The theory that some kind of nuclear attack wiped out Tel El Hammam was brought up and appeared on news sites around the globe. It wasn't long before comparisons were drawn to Sodom and Gomorrah. Even if this wasn't a nuclear blast, something had obviously suddenly destroyed an important hub in the Jordan Desert in the Bronze Age, and the location seemed to match up closely with what biblical scholars have suggested for the two notorious cities. It's estimated that it would have taken a destructive force of around 15 megatons to destroy the ancient city. This would be 1,000 times more destructive than the weapon used in the attack on Hiroshima. However, the biggest nuclear weapon ever tested yielded a force of 50 megatons, so the weapon needed to destroy Tel El Hammam would be hypothetically possible. The theory that an ancient advanced civilization, or aliens, used a nuclear weapon thousands of years ago has many skeptics. But there is a more fringe theory, though. A nuclear weapon isn't the only thing that could have caused the immense heat and pressure necessary for the evidence found in the Jordan Desert. While trinitite has only been found in places of man-made destruction, tektites are typically found in areas where a meteorite strikes, causing the heat that melts the sand into these teardrop shapes. In this theory, the object that destroyed the cities would have looked like fire and brimstone falling from the sky, rather than erupting from the earth as would have been seen in a nuclear attack. Some scientists have suggested that the strike could have happened close to the Dead Sea, which would have thrown up a lot of salt, which may have evolved into the detail of Lot's wife. There is a problem with this theory, though. It's a problem that's shared by both the meteorite explanation and the nuclear war explanation. On both occasions, a blast wave would have been the most destructive force. It would have radiated out for miles and definitely knocked down Lot and his family as they tried to escape. This wave is missing from the biblical account of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. If the story is based on truth, the person who told the story would have certainly been knocked out by the blast. Another final theory is that a meteor or even nuclear strike on Tel El-Hammam, or some other city, inspired the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, according to some theorists. This would be similar to how the eruption of Santorini is believed to have inspired the story of Atlantis. The memory of the destruction of Tel El-Hammam could have inspired later legends and myths until it eventually became the biblical story we know today. The only other explanation would be that the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah really did play out exactly how the Bible described it, and the writer simply didn't feel that it was necessary to describe how the survivors were knocked down by the blast. It is a rather small detail and doesn't provide any significance to the story at hand. And this explanation, to some, is far scarier than any ancient nuclear war. Number 2. On April 26, 1986, the nuclear power plant at Chernobyl suffered a catastrophic meltdown. For a week, the Soviet government tried to stop information about the disaster from spreading, even to those living nearby. It would take much longer for the truth to come out, and even now there are many conspiracy theories about the incident. According to the official version of events, it was just an accident, but one that could have been prevented. The designs of the power plant were flawed, and the equipment didn't work properly at low power. Reactor 4 was turned down to just 7% during a test to see how long the turbines would spin if the plant lost power. That made the reactor unstable. There was a power surge as fuel rods were inserted into the reactor, and the rush of steam led to an increase in pressure, which eventually erupted in the accident we know today. Workers and firefighters rushed to try to prevent the disaster from spreading too much, but after the accident, it was shrouded in secrecy. Rumors were allowed to spread. These were about both the extent of the accident and the cause. When Western media eventually learned of the accident, they reported that thousands of people had lost their lives immediately. They were accused of spreading propaganda by Soviet authorities, but the Soviets hadn't revealed the true extent of the incident to their own citizens, let alone to the outside world. The truth gradually emerged that a limited number of people had passed away on the day of the accident, but the true number of people who lost their lives early due to the radiation from Chernobyl is still unclear. It's generally agreed today that it was simply an accident. The design flaw, combined with bad safety practices, meant that even though the accident could have been prevented, it wasn't deliberate. There are many conspiracy theories that suggest this isn't the case. Some believe that the CIA or some similar Western organization was responsible for the accident. The Chernobyl disaster came at just the wrong time for the Soviet Union, and was one of the first steps to the dissolution of the USSR. It was not the only cause, but may have played a role in speeding up the breakup of the state. Early in the investigation into the disaster, the authorities collected records from the plant and even looked into everyone who worked there. There were rumors that there had been an American spy either in Chernobyl or one of the surrounding cities. They never identified somebody who could have been responsible for some kind of sabotage, but that didn't stop the rumor from spreading. After the accident, there was a scheme which officially was designed to help children who had been impacted by the Chernobyl disaster. They received aid from Western countries and would even go on vacation to one of these places. People who believed the West was responsible for the disaster believed this was a way to monitor the effects of radiation poisoning, and it wasn't an innocent aid scheme. Another piece of evidence for this theory was a strange drawing that appeared in a Soviet newspaper a week before the incident. The drawing showed 16 dots with a star in the center. It had nothing to do with any other story on that page. Some have suggested that the 16 dots represented Chernobyl, and that the star was the meltdown. It was allegedly a warning to the Soviet government from the US. If they didn't surrender, Chernobyl would be destroyed. Other than this, there wasn't much to say America or any other country had anything to do with the disaster. Other conspiracy theories suggest that the Soviet Union caused the disaster. There are a few different theories about why the USSR would want to sabotage their own nuclear disaster. At the time, Ukrainian and Belarusian nationalists suggested that it had been designed to destroy the local people. The power plant sat near 3 Ukrainian rivers, and it was Ukrainian citizens who were most heavily impacted by the disaster. Belarus was also close to the plant, and politicians there feared people were the targets of some deliberate disaster caused by Russia. Another theory suggested that the specific people impacted by the disaster weren't important to the saboteurs. What was important was that the people were hit by radiation. This theory suggested that the meltdown was caused deliberately so that scientists could study the impact of a nuclear disaster on a nearby population. This was allegedly in preparation for sabotaging nuclear power plants in Western countries, or some other kind of nuclear attack. It could be easy to see why this theory gained traction when it took a week for an exclusion zone to be put into place. Even then, it was a while before most people living in what would become the final exclusion zone were made aware of the dangers. People weren't told of any precautions for how to protect themselves, and had to rely on remedies spread through rumors that may have done more harm than good. If this theory were correct, it wasn't out of embarrassment that the Soviet Union kept the disaster a secret. They needed the population to remain in place for as long as possible, so they could properly study what happened to them. Yet another theory suggests that the sabotage was motivated by something much more long-term. Since the Chernobyl disaster, the public perception of nuclear power plants has been much more negative. Generally, there isn't much of a danger with these plants compared to any other power plant. As long as proper safety protocols are in place, a Chernobyl disaster is unlikely to be repeated. But the creepy images coming from the area around the deserted power plant left their mark in the minds of the population, especially in the West. This led to campaigns to prevent new nuclear power plants from being built. According to this theory, that was the end goal for the KGB when they caused the disaster. Because Europe had decided not to build their own nuclear power plants, they were reliant on power derived from fossil fuels, which would primarily come from Russia. Rather than being the cause of the USSR's collapse, the disaster was a way to ensure that Russia remained important going into the 21st century. Each of these theories makes for an interesting story, and could easily be the plot of a fiction novel set during the Cold War. But there's no evidence for any of them. The official story remains that Chernobyl was nothing more than a tragic accident. Number 1. The Fermi paradox is something that comes up often in science fiction, and something that many conspiracy theories try to answer. If life is as abundant in the universe as scientists believe it could be, why have we not found it yet? Now, I want to preface this theory again by saying that this is in no way meant to demean or question anyone's religion. It's merely a collection of theories and food for thought. Don't let some crazy YouTube video make you question your beliefs. But one of the responses to this question is the prison planet or prison Earth conspiracy theory. We haven't found aliens yet because we're being purposefully isolated by an extraterrestrial species that we're a part of. This theory suggests that humans did not evolve on Earth. Instead, we evolved on another planet, perhaps one that orbits Alpha Centauri. For some reason, a portion of the population on that planet was transported to Earth and left here. This could have happened tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ago. From that point, these early humans developed, wiping out early hominid species that were actually native to Earth, and possibly mating with some of them. Humans today are the descendants of these early prisoners, but we've not been released by the prison guards and must continue to live on this prison planet. Evidence for this theory can be found in religious texts and scientific research. Many religions around the world feature a deity or multiple deities that purposefully placed humanity on planet Earth. These deities set out rules for the humans to follow and punish them for not following these rules. The story of the Tower of Babel could be one early story that hints at the prison Earth theory. The story from the Old Testament involves early humans building a city and a tower which reached up into the clouds into heaven. God confused the languages of the builders and scattered them around the world to stop the tower and city from being completed. This story is seen in other parts of the world and in different folklore, with a tower being built to reach the gods and the gods either destroying it or disrupting the building process. If Earth is actually a prison, this could be a story of an attempted escape of some kind, and the prison wardens disrupting it. The theory also ties into the ancient alien theories, where the gods of ancient people were actually aliens. The Mesopotamian mythology of the Anunnaki is a favorite of ancient alien conspiracy theories, and appears to fit into the theory that the Earth is a prison. In this mythology, humans were created by the gods to do work. This could translate to humans being sentenced to hard labor for whatever crimes occurred to put us on Earth. The scientific evidence for a prison Earth theory is even more intriguing than the religious indications. The theory even recently received a boost from respected scientist Ellis Silver, a US ecologist. Silver collected evidence which he believes indicates that humans did not evolve on Earth. The problem begins at birth. Childbirth is extremely dangerous for both the mother and child. It's painful and there's a high risk of serious complications. This isn't seen anywhere else on Earth, and it doesn't make much sense for humans to have naturally evolved this way. One reason why childbirth is so difficult is due to the size of the baby's head. Humans are born much more prematurely than other mammals, with a skull that isn't fully formed. It takes years for humans to be able to walk and be self-sufficient in the same way that other animals do, almost as soon as they're born. Silver argues that these are signs that humans evolved to give birth in another environment, rather than the one that we find ourselves in today. Another major factor is back pain, which humans develop much more frequently than any other animal. This suggests that humans evolved to walk on a planet with much lower gravity than Earth. Humans suffer from chronic diseases in general much more commonly than other animals do. Another major indicator that we weren't developed for this planet is sunburn. Sunburn in other animals is extremely rare, while for many humans it happens every year without external protection. According to this conspiracy theory, this is due to the fact that humans evolved on a planet which received less UV radiation from its star, and so the level of protection reached by other animals wasn't necessary. Another piece of evidence could be the fact that humans are designed to have 2 periods of 4 hours of sleep, with a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night. This doesn't appear to serve much purpose on Earth, but could have been useful elsewhere in the universe. All this appears to be evidence that humans didn't evolve on Earth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Earth is a prison. A sequel to Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has a similar story, where a refugee ship from another planet lands on Earth, and the intelligent humans from a ship eventually wipe out the native humanoid population. In that story, the refugees were the least desirable people from their planet, but they weren't purposefully being kept on Earth. Evidence that humans committed some kind of crime to put us on Earth is that humans are naturally violent. It's a myth that humans are the only species that will attack members of their own species, but humans do take this to an extreme. This goes from criminals attacking other individuals to wars spanning the entire globe. If a species of advanced extraterrestrials has gotten to a point where there were only a small group of violent people on their planet, it could make sense that they would want to put those people somewhere else. The theory suggests that these aliens chose a planet similar to their own, but it wasn't quite perfect. This is why we're able to thrive on Earth but still have these small problems. It also suggests that humans could be welcomed back to our original home, once we become peaceful enough and learn our lesson. UFOs and other apparent alien encounters could be aliens checking to see if we've reached that level of peacefulness yet. A theory that often appears in discussions about extraterrestrials is that they're waiting for humans to become more peaceful and give up nuclear weapons. This was the message supposedly given by a member of the Ashtar Galactic Command during the 1977 Southern television broadcast interruption. Whoever interrupted the broadcast claimed that humans would be welcomed into an intergalactic community if they gave up their weapons. The person responsible for the hijacking has never been found. It's almost certain that this was a human hoaxer, rather than a real alien that only decided to contact a small geographical area. But this could indicate that humans intuitively know what's stopping us from joining the other advanced civilizations that are out there. A final piece of this theory suggests that the moon may be part of the conspiracy. There are a lot of discrepancies about the size, composition, and gravitational pull of the moon. There's evidence that the moon may be older than the Earth. It's also extremely large when compared to Earth in comparison to other planets and their moons. Some believe that this indicates that it was purposefully built, either to shield Earth from asteroids and other space debris, or as a monitoring station. If UFOs are prison wardens coming close to check in on us, the moon may be where the everyday monitoring takes place from. The theory suggests that if humans ever tried to get further from Earth than the moon, our prison wardens will intervene like they did when the Babylonians built the Tower of Babel. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.